Today we will be exploring ancient Greece's greatest craftsman, inventor, sculptor, and the father of the famous Icarus. Yes, we're talking about Daedalus. And there are some crazy shenanigans that go down with this tale. We've got jealousy, we've got murder, 2 murders actually. We've got a Minotaur, some questionable love interests, a tragedy, and a puzzle. A puzzle with a prize, yes. Or so they thought. Yes, we're going there. Hurrah! First of all, hello. My name is Laura, and I like to rewrite and retell myths, legends, and folklores, particularly Greek myths, and present them in the form that they were originally intended, as stories read out loud. Now, before we get started, just remember that each myth has its own interpretation, its own version, its own translation, and this is just the angle that I decided to go with today. Let's grab a drink or a snack. And where's my drink? Oh, all right, let's begin. Let's head to the city of Athens. A nice early morning, mud brick homes tanned and warming up for the day to come. Fresh loaves of breads were baking, herbs were toasting. Moist mud from unpaved streets broke from the ground as scurried feet head to shops to spend or to work, along with animals, sheep, cows, and all the delightful smells they bring along. And when Daedalus opened up his shop, he breathed in that brisk air. Yes, it's a good morning indeed. He began chiseling away at a stone monument. People stopped by, as they always do, and he awaited their praise. And it was not unearned. He was the greatest inventor, craftsman, sculptor that ancient Greece had ever seen, not only with stone, but also with wood and metal. It was he who taught the people how to build better homes, and how to hang their doors on hinges, and how to support their roofs with pillars. He was also the first to attach things with glue. A man entered and flung his arms in the air. "Good morning, Daedalus," he said. "Morning," Daedalus answered, placing his tools down. "And to you, Icarus," the man said to the little boy sitting in the corner, piling his blocks of wood on top of each other, building a miniature house. The man gazed up at the sculpture that Daedalus was making in awe. "So this is what you're working on," he said. Like the sculpture was dancing. The hands were shifting, her dress was swirling, and her face was both in concentration and pleasure over her dance. "Wow," he gasped. That was often the reaction, for his sculptures were incredibly lifelike. Daedalus was the first to accomplish making sculptures mid-movement, as most other sculptures were as stiff and still as the rock that they were carved from. Even the great hero Heracles saw the sculpture that Daedalus had made of him, and he was so frightened by its realism that he attacked it. And naturally, once Heracles realized that it was indeed a stone statue, he was incredibly embarrassed and very apologetic. Luckily, the man in the shop was not frightened at all by its lifelike movements, instead, simply admiring it. The man gazed for just a moment longer before he started looking around. "Will your nephew, Talos, be coming in today?" the man said. Daedalus' smile slowly fell away until only a bitter expression remained. I'm not sure," he answered. "He's quite the inventor, isn't he? Like you. He's all the people of Athens can talk about at the moment." Yes. Yes, he was. Daedalus, his nephew, was indeed talented, a quick learner, and his eyes were always open to the potential of nature around him and the new things he could create with it. Such as one day, as Daedalus walked by the sea, he picked up the spine of a large fish, which inspired him to copy the spiny details into iron, in which he created a saw. He also watched how birds carved holes into the trunk of trees, and from that he learned how to make and use a chisel. He invented the wheel in which potters used to make pottery from clay. But Daedalus, he didn't see this as a good thing. No, if his ego was a peach, then every new invention that Daedalus made hit him like a bruise. And with each compliment towards Daedalus rotted more and more from the inside. Daedalus clenched his teeth together, and swallow slugged down his throat like mud. It did not help that this man, clearly oblivious to Daedalus' animosity towards Daedalus, kept going. They think Daedalus will be better than you one day. He laughed. Ha ha! Loudly! But Daedalus did not. Instead, those words seeped under his skin like a poison. Jealousy, rage, and resentment were all there. He could not allow his nephew to surpass him. He was the greatest inventor. He was the craftsman. It should be his name remembered through these inventions, not his nephew's. Ah, there he is, the man added, patting Daedalus on the back. They said their good mornings and the man left, leaving Daedalus to approach his uncle. Morning, uncle, he said. Daedalus grunted as a response, grumbling something under his breath. Where Daedalus was darkening in the presence of his nephew, Daedalus became brighter and announced, "Did you see the builder down the road? He was using the saw I made." Yes, Daedalus ground his teeth. It made him angrier how ignorant Daedalus seemed, always so innocent and proud of his accomplishments. Ugh, how dare he? "What work are we doing today?" Daedalus asked. "We have some work to do by the Acropolis. We should head there now before it gets too busy."
Hi, yeah, it's Acropolis, not Acropolis. Acropolis. I'm so embarrassed. Anyway.
Now, the Acropolis was a pillared monument, a citadel even in size. One could see it from most places in Athens. Built into an outcrop, it perched itself nicely on top of a big hill with a steep cliff on one of the sides. So steep, in fact, that standing too close to the edge could be a deadly fall. On the way there, Athenians said hi to both of them. But Daedalus noticed that their enthusiasm towards Daedalus was greater than it was towards him. Their praises, their gratitude, their mutters of all the wonders that Daedalus will accomplish. And it was all becoming too much for Daedalus. He places Daedalus on the corner of the Acropolis, the closest part of the building to the edge of the hill by the cliff. He waited for Daedalus to call him over so that he could show Daedalus his work. Obviously to brag about how great he is or something. Well, Daedalus saw it that way anyway. "So, what do you think?" Daedalus asked, leaning back so Daedalus could lean forwards and inspect every detail. Daedalus said, tapping the stone. "Needs a bit of work here." Baffled a little, Daedalus came closer. "Really? Where?" "Oh, let me reenact this. It's okay. Oh, serious time, the sleeves are up." He noticed that Daedalus was distracted, right? So he grabs his arm and he shoves him off the cliffside. Daedalus was falling, his hands longingly reaching for his uncle, his face drenched in terror of the death that was coming for him. Unbeknownst to Daedalus though, Athena, the goddess of wisdom, was watching them, and she took pity on the poor Talus, wrongfully thrown off a cliff. So, just before he hit the ground, she turned him into a partridge, in which he swooped up and flew into the woods. Daedalus sat back, catching his breath, his heart thumping, adrenaline still shaking all the bones in his fingers. Eventually, he turned around, and oh dear, a group of people had seen what he had just done. They gasped, whispering amongst each other in dismay. And at first, they were outraged. They came for Daedalus, crying, grief-stricken, and in shock. With any other man, they would have demanded that he be put to death for committing such an act. But as much as they loved Talos, they loved Daedalus even more. He had been in Athens his whole life, and he had done so much for the Athenian people. And instead, as punishment for his crime, Daedalus was exiled and ordered to board the next leaving ship. So, scraping up his most prized possessions and his son Icarus by his side, he felt kind of strange. There was no competition now, but regretted that this emotional impulse got him caught. And now he wondered if his name was Daedalus the Great Inventor or Daedalus the Murderer. Both him and his son Icarus boarded the ship and they set sail, watching Athens get smaller and smaller. And after some time, he arrived at the island of Crete. We have arrived! If any of you are familiar at all with Greek mythology, you may have an idea what goes down on this island. Most notably, from this guy. Yes, but we are not there just yet. No, don't worry. We'll cover it all. So, Daedalus arrives at Crete, a large and beautiful island with sapphire blue water clearer than glass, and great mountain ranges that were golden from the bright sunshine. And awaiting for him at the port was King Minos. And though this port was very busy, people moved around King Minos and his guards like he was a speck of oil in water. King Minos was a mature, stocky, and proud-looking man with a beard and a crown perched over his curls. Daedalus, welcome, welcome, Minos announced, throwing his arms in the air pleasurably to greet him. Daedalus waddled off the boat, catching his sea legs, his tools in one hand and Icarus's hand in the other. If King Minos was aware at all what happened in Athens with Daedalus, the events that transpired recently, well, he didn't show it. Instead, he was boasting about Daedalus' achievements as if they were his own. I have heard that you learned the power of the wind to create sails for ships. And you created the ship's prow. Daedalus nodded along with King Minos, but more than anything, he was relieved that the scar on his name had not yet reached this isle, if it would at all. Here, he was still considered great, and here he could return to the man that he once was. King Minos, he was excited, placing a hand on Daedalus' back and guiding him towards his palace. With your craftsmanship and inventions, you must stay within the palace of Knossos. Create for me as you did in Athens, and I will make you chief of artisans. And Daedalus? He accepted. How could he not? He was rewarded as soon as he arrived. And now he can start over. What could possibly go wrong? The palace was more magnificent than Daedalus could ever have imagined it to be. It was boastful with fountains and drapes and pillars and windows, sculptures and never-ending twists and turns of corridors and steps. There were people also in abundance, guards, servants, weaving around each other like they were ants in a nest. At first, Daedalus thought that King Minos was showing him to the quarters in which he would reside in. But after this was taking some time, he realized the king was actually giving him a tour. They passed one hall where the door was slightly ajar, and a girl was center, dancing. It was enough to make Daedalus stop, step back, and look inside. Icarus hugged his leg, watching also. And King Minos, he answered Daedalus's silent question. "That is my daughter, Ariadne." "She is an excellent dancer," Daedalus said. "Yes, I believe she can become one of Greece's greatest dancers. If she focuses." She moved more fluently than a... I'm not a dancer. She moved more fluently than a goddess, and quickly enchanted anyone who was lucky enough to see her, flashing her ankles and twisting her hands to the sky. Her dress swirled endlessly and never interrupted the pattern of her footwork. But then, suddenly she stopped and frowned at the ground, huffing a little with frustration. It seemed that it was not her focus that was the problem. King Minos walks in. "Our new chief of artisans says you dance well." Unaware of their watchful eyes, Ariadne jumped a little. "Thank you," she said. Daedalus kneeled before her. "Something seemed to have stopped you from finishing your dance?" She glanced at her father, then back to Daedalus. "The floors, they are either too slippy or too sticky, and their patterns are distracting. They throw off my steps." Daedalus nodded and pressed his finger along the ground in one squeaky movement, studied it, and nodded again. "I could create a floor for you." He glanced up at Minos. "If that is okay?" Minos roared a laugh and pat him on the back. "Ha! I knew you belonged here." And after their tour, King Minos showed Daedalus a large room equipped with tools and tables and shelves that he could use as his workshop, and then to his quarters where he and Icarus could live out their stay. And Daedalus got to work straight away, showing Crete the gifts and talents that he had once shared with Athens. He made animated toys for children and showed the people how to use drills and axes and glue. But one of his most famous creations that he ever made was the first ever dance floor that he made for Ariadne. In the shape of a circle, the floor was white marble and decorated with patterns, evoking the dancers to whirl like stars in limitless movements in which they could never be constricted, but instead transcending. And the dancing floor, it was so marvelous, even the gods admired it. Its maze-like patterns were perhaps a foreshadowing of the labyrinth that would soon come. And that would be the beginning of the downfall for Daedalus. And for many years, all was going well for Icarus and Daedalus. But with building one questionable contraption, that all seemed to change for Daedalus and would turn his stay into one of a prisoner and force him to build contraptions for an elaborate escape, one which the consequences would haunt him forever. But let's not get ahead of ourselves, and let's instead delve into the Minotaur and the labyrinth. And oh boy, does this part of the story, it goes places. But before all that, we need context. Who is the Minotaur? And how did such a creature come to be? Well, I'm glad you asked. Hold on to your socks. It's about to get crazy. Anyway, well, you see, King Minos had siblings. Brothers, in fact. Ugh, pesky brothers. And it was amongst these brothers, they all believed that Crete was rightfully theirs. And even though Minos was the one sitting on that throne, the squabbling never ceased. And so Minos threw out his hands. He threw out his hands and pleaded to the gods, show me a sign that I am the one and true ruler of Crete, and that you support my claim over my brothers. And they answered him, yes, Poseidon did, to be exact. So Poseidon answers him, right? And as an omen to Minos's prayers, Poseidon sends him a pure white bull, a marvelous creature, with fur softer than silk and whiter than snow. But, but, there was a catch. Ha! There always is. In exchange for this gift, Minos has to vow to slaughter the bull in Poseidon's honor. But upon seeing this bull, it was the most beautiful creature that Minos had ever seen. And as boastful as his lands were without this bull, well, with it here now, it was as wonderful as a monument. Something that people can look at from afar and admire. It was like putting a diamond on top of an already beautiful golden ring. And Minos, well, he was unable to kill it. Instead, he slaughtered another bull. You know, one of those ordinary brown ones. The ones peasants have. But yes, he deceived the god of the sea. Well, tried to, anyway. Poseidon caught on. Yes, he did. Furious, he goes to Minos and he says, if you love this bull so much, then I will make your wife love it too. In a bizarre twist of revenge, a curse was placed on King Minos's wife, Pasiphae. And when I say that she loved this bull, I do not mean in a healthy, normal way, like one might love and care for a pet. No. This is a Greek myth after all, and they don't do things by halves. No, she fell in love with the bull, crazed with passion and feral with lust. Pasiphae ran to Daedalus and grabbed his clothes, crying, Daedalus, make me a wooden bull, one big enough that I can fit inside of it. I've seen your work and I know you can do it. Daedalus nervously looked around. Well, yes, I can, but do it, please. I want to be with him. Him? Daedalus hesitated to ask. The bull, she shrieked, as if he was the stupidest person she had ever met. Losing more and more of her temper and composure, she was as angry as she was desperate. Whether he knew the true meaning of her words, or whether he turned a blind eye to blissful ignorance, as, let's face it, most of us probably would, he made her what she so desired. And he crafted her a hollow wooden cow, the same size as a real one. And as she requested, yes, it was big enough for her to fit inside of it. Daedalus sheeted the outside layer of the wood with real cow's fur. So it would not be foolish to assume that this was a living, breathing creature. And if humans could be fooled into believing it was a cow, well, the white bull would be also. And yes, one day, Pasiphae hid inside the wooden animal in the field where the bull was kept. He saw this cow. Moo, get me out of here. And yes, they mated. Anyway, moving on from that. Please. Alright, so Pasiphae was now pregnant. And after a horrific birth, as one could imagine, a creature that was half bull and half human was born, thus creating the Minotaur. Say hi! Hello! Apparently the Minotaur's British. Anyway, so the Minotaur was born, but this creature was more a wild animal than human. The bigger it grew, the more uncontrollable and violent and bloodthirsty it became. And it seemed the only thing that was able to quench its appetite was human flesh. King Minos, he was at a loss. This creature and how it came to be, it disturbed and embarrassed him. Yet, for some reason, he did not kill it. As the Minotaur grew more ferocious each passing day, so he ran to an oracle pleading for advice to contain this monstrosity. And her advice to him was to build a maze for the Minotaur to roam in. And who do you think the task of building such a maze was given to? That's right, Daedalus. It was his responsibility to create a labyrinth for the monster that even Daedalus himself would not be able to escape from. The Minotaur would spend its days wandering around, and every 7 to 9 years, it would feast on 7 girls and 7 boys from Athens as a part of repayment for King Minos after his son unfairly died in Athens. And it was one of these young men that would decide, enough is enough. And he came prepared to slay the Minotaur monster. Now his name, the hero-to-be, his name is Theseus, and though today it is not his tale that is being told, Daedalus was involved in Theseus' story as well. Minos' daughter Ariadne, the dancer, she was now a young woman, and upon meeting the Athenian hero Theseus, well, in true Greek mythology fashion, she immediately fell in love with him and could not allow him to be sacrificed to this half-brother monster. So, just like her mother did all those years ago, she came running to Daedalus, pleading out of love. Can you make something, anything that will keep Theseus safe, anything that will bring him back to me? Daedalus hesitated. You see, Daedalus was already in hot waters with King Minos at this point. After he created the contraption that allowed his wife to go and have an affair, if you can call it that, and bear responsibility for bringing this monster into the world, Daedalus knew that helping Theseus defeat the Minotaur would only bring more problems for Minos, and in turn would bring more problems to him. Daedalus felt like he was sitting in a pot of water above a fire, and it was only so long before the simmering water of Minos' temper would boil over and burn him alive. While his thoughts were shouting at him to think of himself and Icarus, Ariadne clasped his hands and whispered, "Please, please help him." He sighed in defeat. He was never someone who could easily turn down matters of the heart. And maybe Minos won't know about it. Ha! So, Daedalus went to his workshop looking for a solution. He scanned through all his tools and his inventions. After some time, he was at a loss. He deliberately made this maze to be inescapable and was now in a battle against the worst competitor, himself. Defeated, he turned to leave when he accidentally knocked into his bench. A needle and a thread hooked into his clothes. He stepped back, and the thread followed in one swooping line. So Daedalus gave Theseus a ball of threads and tied one end to the entrance and the other Theseus carried on his waist. Throughout the labyrinth, Theseus had his victory, ending the life of the Minotaur and safely leaving both the labyrinth and Crete. And it was soon thereafter that that scalding pot of King Minos, it boiled over. Outraged, he ordered Daedalus and his son Icarus to be locked in a tower as prisoners. No! With only the tools he had on him at the time, their arms were grabbed and their feet dragged through the palace halls of Knossos. They were thrown into an old room where there was cloaks over tables. Dust swirled at their arrival. At least the view was nice. High in the tower, the open ocean was vast and blue, and it sparkled ticklishly from the sun's reflection on it. It was within this tower Icarus was lounging on a chair. Now a young man, he was chewing on a loaf of stale bread. Daedalus, on the other hand, was fiddling with his tools, but his mind was blank. And after a while of silence, Daedalus turned to his son and said, "I'm sorry for imprisoning us both like this." Icarus shrugged and took another bite of his loaf. Daedalus raised a brow. "You do not seem to mind," he said. Icarus sighed. "We've always been prisoners, in a way. There's not much difference to being in here as it was down there." Daedalus sat up. "What do you mean by that? King Minos would never have let you leave if you wanted to, even before all this." Daedalus thought about it, entertaining what his son just said. How would the conversation have gone if he had ever told Minos that he was planning to leave, venture to new lands, and create new inventions? His son was right. It would never have been permitted. Perhaps he just never realized it because he was once happy here. Minos had used this palace as a cage. Daedalus realized that the lock had not been twisted now, but had been since the moment he arrived. Icarus threw a crumb of bread onto the table and grinned when a little bird swooped in. Its feet skipped across the wood, snatched the crumb, and flew out the window. At first, Daedalus was irritated. He had told Icarus many times to stop leaving bread for the birds. They leave their feathers all over the place, poop on his tools, and they stole the food that he had yet to eat. This time felt different. The bird was a spark of inspiration, an invitation to create. Daedalus turned to his son and asked, "Would you leave here with me, if you could?" Icarus pondered, mid-chew. "If I could. We could cross the sea out of Greece, and perhaps to the coast of Egypt. Would you come with me?" Daedalus said. Icarus caught the determination in his father's eye and nodded. "I would." Daedalus stared at a feather, swaying slowly to the ground. "I have an idea." Over the months, Daedalus watched the birds as they came and went, how their wings fluttered outside their nests, how they swooped in for prey, and how they pushed down to get higher and higher and glide across the ocean. He left crumbs for them and collected their feathers, until a pile as big as fallen leaves sat in the corner. And outside the window, there were bees. Yes, a bee's nest snuggled into the alcove between the roof and the wall. And Daedalus, he collected the honeycombs and boiled them in water to create wax. Breaking the leather and wood from unused furniture, he sculpted them into body braces. Daedalus created 2 magnificent winged contraptions tied around their torso and shoulders, and spent days specifying it to each of their body shapes. And finally, the day came where they would escape and fly all the way to Egypt to yet again start fresh. That morning, their buckles were tightened and their wings latched. Daedalus took a brave inhale, overlooking his son one last time to make sure everything goes to plan. "Are you ready?" Daedalus asked. Icarus nodded nervously. "I think so." Daedalus stood closer to him. "Now remember, do not fly too close to the ocean. If the wings get wet, they will bring you down into the water and you will drown. And do not fly too high up. The sun will melt the wax and then the wings will fall apart. Do you understand me?" Icarus nodded. "Yes, I understand." Daedalus smiled. "Okay, let's go." And so their journey began. Daedalus and Icarus leapt from their window, and the air whistled as it rushed against their bodies and was cold against their skin. At first, terrifyingly, the wings seemed useless against the force of the wind, but as they pushed their arms down to flap like a bird, they began to glide. The air softened, now stroking warmly against them. They could hear the ocean rustling below. It was beautiful and peaceful. The father and son looked at each other, smiling brightly, and playfully fluttered their wings. And who can blame them to be given the gift of flight? This would have been so exciting. They're the first people to fly, like birds. Caca! And it was from this excitement that, unfortunately, doomed one of their fates. As mentioned, Icarus was a young man. He had been locked in a palace for most of his life, and this adventure, it was thrilling, it was freeing. The open ocean was calling to him. He wanted to feel all of it. The wind in his hair, the sprays from the sea, the heat of the sun. He wanted to twirl and swoon all the way to Egypt. And with this, he dismissed his father's warning. He pushed down on his wings, soaring into the sky, where the sun was a white beast, blazing fire at him. But he loved it. Yes, he fluttered higher and higher, as high as he could possibly go. And Daedalus, he looked behind him, and Icarus was nowhere in sight. Startled, he began frantically searching the ocean. He was not there. He looked up and watched his son fly willingly towards the sun. No, Daedalus cried, but Icarus could not hear him. That was until his skin started burning, as if thick hot oil was pouring over his arms and down his back. He looked at the yellow, glistening liquid melt over his skin and scorch it red. Icarus panicked, attempting to use his wings to fly, but the feathers had fallen off, drifting to the sea slowly, and Icarus was falling too. But he was falling hard and heavy, like a meteor crashing into the ocean. Daedalus flew down as quick as he could to a nearby shore, ripping off his wings and running to the body of his son upon the sand. He cradled Icarus's lifeless body, and he cried and he grieved for the death of his son that he felt responsible for. And some sources say that in a nearby forest, a partridge saw the whole thing, and it chirped merrily, almost sounding like laughter. Other sources say a cruel divine intervention to mirror the crime that he committed against his nephew, Daedalus, all those years ago. It was at this beach that Daedalus buried Icarus, and it would be named after him as Icaria. Now, remember the puzzle that I mentioned all the way at the beginning? After burying Icarus, Daedalus went to Sicily, where his reputation once again favorably preceded him, and he was offered protection under King Cocalus. Just like he did in Athens, and just like he did in Crete, he would create inventions for him and his people. But, we haven't forgotten about King Minos, have we? If Minos would not have let Daedalus leave, how do you think he would have reacted to the discovery that he had escaped? Well, he was furious. This was his adventure, god damn it! And he would chase Daedalus to the edge of the world to get him back. But he could not be hasty about it. The world was large, and resources were expensive. Minos knew as well that Daedalus was smart. He was cunning and quick-witted. These were the qualities he liked about Daedalus, and now they would be used against him. He would have to instead lure him out and devise a trick for Daedalus to reveal his location without realizing he had done so. So, King Minos created a puzzle. Yes, and invited all the kings of the known world to solve it. Ooh, the task was to run a thread throughout a spiral conch. And those who managed to complete this puzzle would be heavily rewarded. Ooh, a game with a prize. And one by one, the kings were getting knocked out of the competition. Losers, failures, second place is as good as last. Anyway, so King Cocalus, he was presented this puzzle, right? He had the perfect candidate to solve it. He had Daedalus, and then the prizes would be theirs. Yay! And he was right, yes. Daedalus did indeed solve it. How, you may ask? Daedalus he pierced a hole on the back of the shell and dripped some honey inside. And then tied a string around an ant and let the ant journey its way through and thread the shell. People were amazed. Yay! Someone solved the puzzle with prizes. But with this, they had unwillingly played into Minos's plan. Now Minos has found the man he was looking for and made his way to Sicily. And upon his arrival, he demanded that King Cocalus handed over Daedalus. I know he's here. Give him back to me, or else. King Cocalus sat back, twiddling his fingers. This was a problem indeed. The last thing that Cocalus wanted to do was anger Minos. He was a powerful man after all, but also he didn't want to give up Daedalus. He was his inventor now. Go get your own! He had to get rid of one or the other. So, whilst King Cocalus was making his decision, he invited Minos to stay longer. He'd had a long journey after all for a king. Have some food, have some wine, have a nice hot bath. Seeing no harm in such an invitation, King Minos accepts it. And that night, King Cocalus had his daughters prepare Minos a bath. Seems innocent enough. His bath full, assuming now that he was alone. He slipped off his robes and stepped into the water. It was so nice and warm that goosebumps billowed across his skin, and he sat, sighing and relaxed. Until King Cocalus's daughter came in with buckets of scalding water and poured it over Minos's head until he was dead. And then they played it off like it was an accident. I mean, whoops, the water was a bit hot, wasn't it? Anyway, people believed it. 3rd-degree burns on top of your head from a bath happens all the time. With King Minos out of the picture, Daedalus was technically a free man. And it was from here that what happened to Daedalus is kind of a mystery. A murder mystery. No, I'm just kidding. It's just a mystery. Some say that he stayed with King Cocalus until he was a ripe old man. And some say that he got bitten by a snake and died. And some say after King Minos' death, he went to new lands, created new inventions, and when he eventually died, it was by the River Nile in Egypt. But many agreed that no amount of fame behind his name could replace the pain. That was meant to be an emotional moment of this. I'm starting to rap. But nothing could replace the pain of losing his son. And that was the mythology behind Daedalus, the sculptor, the craftsman, and all the madness that happens in between. And so, what did we think? I really had fun with this one. The fall of Icarus is so famous with the, if you fly too close to the sun, you'll get burned. It was really fun to research and write. Let me know your thoughts, your feeling. If there are any myths that you would love for me to rewrite and retell for you, I'm all ears and eyes. No. Okay, thanks again. Have a lovely day or night. And I'll see you next time. Bye.